On this episode, the importance of building community and how showing up online helps experts stand out to the press.
Like no press release that you send or no email that you send, I would love to be on your show, is going to be more powerful than actually having a video of you discussing it and doing it in a dynamic way that is fun and interesting to watch. So save the time writing the long release. In news, you're getting 1 million of those. But if there's a video that pops out to somebody, that stands out to somebody, that is super powerful for getting your voice out there.
That is Kendall Breitman, the community manager for Riverside FM, an online recording and editing platform for content creators, mainly podcasters. I'm using Riverside right now to record this for YouTube and also for all podcasting platforms. Hi everyone, this is On Cam Ready. I'm Jamie Maglietta. Thanks so much for being with us. I hope you're enjoying these episodes. Please like this video if you are and subscribe to the channel. Before we get started, I'm in the process of building my very first digital course, and I'm focusing on podcasting. Ever since I was podcasting at CNN, I have been exploring the world of podcasting as an independent content creator. And I've learned a lot, from equipment to platforms, and I'm really enjoying everything I'm learning, and I want to help you navigate this space without as many hurdles as I felt like I was trying to jump over and climb. So I'm putting together this course, and if you're interested, visit my website, oncamready.com, to sign up for my newsletter so you can learn more. And if you're enjoying this, remember, please like the video, maybe even write a review if you're listening on a podcasting platform. Now to our guest. Kendall, as I said, is the community manager for Riverside. In her role, she leads Riverside's community of thousands of content creators. I'm in a few of the groups that she leads, and I love them. We'll talk about that. She advocates for their needs and helping them achieve their goals in these communities. And if you are a Riverside user, you should be on Instagram and also Facebook and joining the groups because they're wonderful resources. Kendall is also a journalist, which is what really attracted me to Kendall. Before joining Riverside, Kendall was a political reporter and television producer for news outlets like MSNBC, Bloomberg News, Politico, and USA Today. So we have a bit of a background that overlaps. I worked at MSNBC for a short time, but we also know what it takes to put together incredible content and really build out conversations. So on this episode, we'll discuss ways to prepare for a podcast or television interview. We're also going to talk about how experts can really attract the press by showing up online and creating content like their own podcast. If you own a business, it's my opinion that you should have a podcast. Put yourself out there. Make sure that video clips show up when journalists are searching your name. Plus, we'll also discuss all the latest tools that Riverside has to offer, including its new AI features. So let's get to the conversation. And Kendall is with us now. Kendall, thank you so much for being with us.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited about this.
As I said in the intro, your journalism background is very appealing to me. We have some overlap with MSNBC, and I just think, tapping into your mindset and what you do with Riverside can really help our listeners. Guys, as I mentioned, she is a community builder with Riverside. And if you are someone who is an expert and you really want to put yourself out there, creating content, creating podcasts is a great way to do that. So Kendall's here to help us break down some wonderful ways to either build a conversation or to put yourself out and pitch guests or pick up guests, really. So Kendall, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into building the community space for Riverside?
Yeah. So, as you said, my background's in journalism, and I had covered the 2016 election. I was covering presidential politics. And after that, I had moved, and it really was a time to reset, figure out what I wanted to do next. And I started doing writing jobs after journalism and kind of quickly realized that it wasn't the writing that I loved so much about journalism. It was really hearing a bunch of different people's stories and then sitting there and saying, what's the story from this, right? So From doing that, it actually community management kind of fell in my lap within Riverside.
Mm,
They'd reached out to me, and when I was reading through it, I was like, wow, this really connects to actually the things that I loved about journalism, hearing those stories, bringing people together, understanding why people feel how they feel, do what they do, follow their passions, that kind of thing.
mhm.
And so that's kind of how I entered the community building space. And I really thought that it'd be this completely foreign type of idea because I'd never done it before, but it really just connects to different things that I'd picked up throughout my career anyway. So it was a pretty natural fit.
Storytelling is so essential for anyone who wants to put their business out there or
Hmm.
sell products. Having your story and knowing what your story is and how to tell it is so important. And with
Yeah.
your background, I really want to get into helping people craft out an interview. But before I do, I want to just stick on this community building for a second, guys. Kendall is working on building a community across Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all the platforms. And those are the platforms where you should be, because she posted on the Riverside Instagram account about, hey guys, let's use this post to help everyone match up and find guests for their podcasts. This podcast post generated so much community building. I mean, it was great, Kendall. I wound up connecting with 5 or 6 people. We all were chatting in the DM. It moved to email. It was great. And that's why I think I even messaged saying we need to do this more often.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'm I'm
the
glad that you loved
community
it.
is great.
Exactly. Thank you. It's also just about like, and this can be applied to anyone who has a podcast or a channel or anything. It's about really understanding what the people who follow you want, or if they don't follow you, why they would follow you because they're chasing what they want.
Mhm.
So that was really an initiative in that way. I mean, beyond just saying, "Hey, Riverside has new features" or things like that, we're trying to create opportunities for people to feel like, this kind of FOMO, like if I'm not following the Riverside page, I'm kind of missing out on those
Yeah.
opportunities to get ultimately what I want, which are guests,
Mhm.
connections, your own community.
And guys, this post she had on Instagram wound up on Facebook and then on LinkedIn, and it generated different types of conversations. And that's also a part that of the conversation that we are constantly having here. If you're an expert, you need to be in these spaces. And it's important to join the groups because you really do start to build community. And if your effort there is valid and you're putting in the work and you're commenting, you can also start to build relationships that result in maybe sales or people following you on your accounts. So you have to think about the potential outcome of building a community. And I just think you're doing a great job, Kendall. So I'm glad we could at least talk about that a little bit. Thank you. What are tips
Yeah, thanks
actually
so
for people
much.
who want to build community?
I would say that a big tip for me when I was starting out was
Hmm.
actually like never assuming that you understand what your community wants.
Hmm.
So again, because I'd come from journalism, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, community, what do people want? They want connections because that's kind of your currency in journalism, right? Like your sources, the people
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
And then I held actually one-on-one calls with users and didn't ask them like, what do you want from community? But I started to understand more
Hmm.
about what drives them. And I understood that they wanted connections, but not
Hmm.
because they wanted to network. It was more about the way that people wanted to learn from each other. People wanted
Yes.
mentors, a person to ask their questions to. Yeah. So I think that my first tip would really be to try to gain as much of an understanding that is not based on your assumptions. It's actually based on seeing people or speaking to people. And the follow up, I guess, would be that like a lot of people, I came into a community and we could reach out to users. It's much easier. So if somebody's like, well, how do I reach out to these people? Go to communities that already exist. So I say all the time, if you're like a health and wellness podcaster, go to Facebook groups about your topic and just see what people are talking about there. Sometimes I like my kind of metaphor for it is that you want people to come to your party, and sometimes it's
Mm.
about going to other parties and seeing what's working and seeing what the cool one is, what got the
Yeah.
most hype. Yeah, to be able to get people to come to yours. And so I think that observing and learning and listening is like incredibly key in building a community. And then also
Mhm.
just don't post and ghost is what I say. Like, don't
Yeah.
just post something on Instagram and then go, okay, the algorithm will do its work. Respond to people, start those conversations, and you'll get more out of it.
Yeah. Building a community is so hard, guys. And, I'm always trying new things and testing things out. And it's all about trying and putting yourself out there and showing up. As Kendall's saying, like, you really just need to start having that confidence to just put yourself out there and even ask questions. If you have them, ask them, and then it can really open the doors to so much. It's opened the doors to numerous podcast guests for me on this show. And I'm always looking for people with Kendall's background, especially because of her journalism background, and the fact that she worked in television really does help. And a lot of people may be thinking, well, I don't know how to pivot those skills from journalism to another job. Well, Kendall's an example of how. So I really do hope that if you're interested in Kendall, that you'll check out the link in my description to her bio and even network with her on LinkedIn, find her and just seek her out, and maybe she can even help you and guide you as well. She's offered her advice here, but you never know. Connect. It's community, guys. Find out more about her by clicking on the link in the description. All right, so guys, we really want to focus on podcasting today and interview prep. So, since she has worked in television and I believe the same tactics apply, I would love to hear what Kendall thinks about interview prep and how she advises people to prep guests before interviews.
Yeah, so a lot of advice I have here, but I will say that when you are prepping, first thing that I do for podcasts, for television, we would always on our team look at previous interviews, watch previous interviews that people have done. And when you're doing that, two things you want to look for. First is you want to look for questions they've been asked over and over again, because you want to skip those or you want to take them a step further. But you will notice that when you're watching people's interviews, there are questions they'll get over and over again. The second is I used to watch interviews actually on other news shows and see where they didn't ask a follow up, but they should have. So if I'm watching something and I still have a question from that interview they did, it would be even a really cool way to show somebody that you did your research by saying, I actually heard you say this on another podcast. Play the clip. But I wanted to go a little step further. What do you feel about this? Or has
Mm-hmm.
your thinking on this changed? So, really watching those interviews first would be something that I would do. And then, second, would be to write down your questions. I would usually write down my questions like on the left hand side of a sheet of paper, divide it in half, and on the other side, see how I can push it. So, an example I give is what's one thing all podcasters should be doing? Like, fine question, but I'm not excited about it. A
Mm-hmm.
way to kind of push that would be what's something that most podcasters aren't doing? What's one mistake
Mm-hmm.
that you see people making all of the time? And not only is that a more interesting question, that answer is kind of made for social, right? Because it's controversial, it's saying kind of against the grain. So those are my like the two things that I start with. But my big tip is that I don't like to come too over prepared because I
Mm-hmm.
personally like I hate interviews where you can tell that the person had their list of questions, but they're not straying from it. It's like at the end of the question, there's this kind of awkward, like, great. And then you move on to the next one. Like there's no follow up, no back and forth type of thing. And those are usually a product of being so prepared that you don't want to stray from that prep. But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the most magical kind of moments in an interview happen when you stray from the prep a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
when you like ask a little bit of a follow up, when you add a little bit more context to your question. So while prep is important, you don't want to like go into it blind. You also just want to make sure that you leave that room to have a conversation.
And, I also liked how you called, the conversation that you may have with a guest before podcasting, your green room. I mean, because
Hmm.
we both are in television, we have an understanding of the green room. But one of the podcast conversations you had, the guests seemed surprised, like, why a green room? But a green room, guys, is typical because that's where the anchors and the guests would really kind of meet before they go on air. That's where the guest is sitting before they are appearing on television. So, Kendall, why did you decide to start calling these conversations before the podcast a green room conversation?
Yeah, I it's fun to be talking with you about this because you get it in this way of like so I was a producer at places like NBC and Bloomberg, and there would just be this kind of special time where before the guest comes on, they're sitting in the green room. They'll usually have their staff with them and they're kind of on their phones. And
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it, like that's not the vibe you want before you go on TV. You want somebody that's talking, they're excited. You don't want the first words they've really spoken in the last 30 minutes to be live on your TV. So what people would do, like myself, you go into the green room and just say like, "Hey, what's going on? You got everything you need.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking today about X, Y, and Z. Like, what are your thoughts on that?" And then they'll talk about it, and you'll go, "Oh my gosh, can you believe?" Like, I would usually come in with a news story because I was doing news. "Can you
Mm-hmm.
believe what so and so said about this and that today?" And then they'd get really animated. "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that they said that," or "I actually think it's good strategy." You just get them kind of talking. And what I
Mm-hmm.
realized with podcasting is that people would maybe sometimes do a pre-interview and it
Mm-hmm.
would be a little bit more informational. It'd say, "We're going to be talking about this and that. Please show up 15 minutes early." And people, when they have that, are a little bit more like buttoned up. They're a little like when people come to go on a podcast, if it's for a professional setting, the mode you're gonna get from them usually is a bit more professional. But if you
Mm-hmm.
have what I call a green room conversation, you set the tone. So if
Mm-hmm.
you want it to be a little bit more playful, you can start speaking like that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's always just before the interview because it guides them into that next room, which is your interview room, or in the case of a green room, your live television set.
And guys, what Kendall is also saying is so essential because I've talked to people who don't really even hash out the conversation before air, and it sounds it. You're like, "Oh, that sounded rough." So in television we would put together packets of information, research, and we would essentially provide that to the anchor or the reporter, and then we would also interview the guest that's coming in to really get a better sense of what they may say. So then you can also tell the anchors, like, they're really passionate about this, they really are enjoying this angle. Having that helps, right? So when
Hmm.
I put together this podcast, I sent Kendall a list. Like, here's some of the topics, here's some of the points I would love to get from you, like 3 tips on this, 1 tip on that. We're not sitting here ironing out how it's going to flow. Like, these are the questions. We're ironing out like the direction we would like to take the conversation. And Kendall responded saying, "I would love to go this direction." And before we started this conversation, we had our little green room chat, where we're talking right before. So all these points are great, Kendall. I'm really glad you could share them. The other thing I wanted to talk about was just, well, yes, it is important to have the guest prepared and the host prepared. But what we didn't really iron out was the talking points that the guest should come prepared with. So when you're on a podcast, how do you prepare your talking points? And what are talking points?
Yeah, so actually, it's funny because I still use this tip from news. And my wife was actually interviewed for local news recently, and I passed the tip to her because it really is, it works every time, especially if you feel a bit all over the place and you're a little bit nervous to be live. I would recommend to guests, and I do this for myself, I write down sometimes like a post-it note on a post-it note, like 3 to 5 bullet points, and they're not complete sentences, they're just like
Mm-hmm.
quick bullet points. Because when you're talking sometimes live, you'll maybe go off on a little side tangent, and then suddenly you're like, "Where was I taking this?" Right? And so what I would recommend doing, and then also besides that, you also don't want to kind of get up from the chair and be like, oh my God, I totally forgot to talk about this one point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to keep you on track and to make sure that all the points that you wanted to get across come across. So,
Mm-hmm.
if I were having one now, maybe I'd have a post-it note that says like importance of green room conversation, um, community management, why it's important, like those kinds of notes, so that I can always bring myself back. So keeping a post-it note with just 3 to 5 bullet points of what you want to say. And of course, you're going to say more, but it's just for those moments that you're like, if I start veering off topic, this is where I
Mm-hmm.
take it back to. And it makes you
Yeah.
feel confident to come into something and
Yeah.
feel like you have a little bit of backup. So you don't feel like you're kind of going into it without any of that. So that's usually what I recommend and what I do myself.
And the other thing you can do is really iron out like your thoughts by writing them out and
Hmm.
thinking, okay, what questions might they ask? Like, I know the direction. What questions might they ask and how might I answer them? And when I answer them, how can I incorporate my messaging so that I'm also getting my interests across during the conversation without it feeling forced? Trying to figure out your messaging and your pivoting, right? So if you do
Yeah.
get a question that you're like, I don't really have much to say about that. You can kind of pivot to something that you do feel passionate about that's similar to what you're talking about. It works. So trying to iron out your pivots, your talking points are all great tips when you're preparing for a interview, when you are a guest on a podcast.
I would
Yeah.
also just quickly add that, like, I think to prep for who the messaging is for. So one thing that I
Mm.
learned from covering politics is that I'd watch the same speech. I'm serious, like over and over and over again. The same candidate would give it. But this, if a candidate was in Alabama versus New York City versus Nevada, or like
Mm-hmm.
the way that they deliver it, the things that they'd expand on a bit more, though even the way that they would kind of dress. I mean, that's different for podcasting, but thinking about which podcast you're going on and what who their audience is, so that your message, you can make sure it connects with those people. So
Yeah.
like I would just add that on top of there.
Thanks, Kendall. That's really great advice about messaging. I'm really glad you could join us today. Everyone, we're with Kendall Breitman, the community manager for Riverside. Guys, it's an online recording platform and editing platform, guys. It's not just for podcasters, it's also for content creators. I've been using Riverside and I absolutely love it. I think it's a wonderful platform. It's developing and there's so many new features, including this AI feature. And just recently, actually, like 2 days ago, I was able to edit a 2.5 minute open and then add it to my Riverside so I could play it out during a live. So these features that are being added are really awesome. Kendall, why don't you tell us where Riverside is at so everyone's aware?
Yeah, so as you said, like we're a recording, editing, kind of end-to-end content creation platform. And what we're also trying to do, a big goal of ours, is that we understand that people who are creating content, you want to get from, like, we all love recording the conversations, and that's really like having these interviews.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to get from record to publish as quickly, but also professionally as possible. Because when you try to do things quickly, you can end up kind of losing a bit of the quality. And with this, that's something that we're really committed to. So beyond getting these high quality video and audio tracks, at the end of it, we also are giving, as you mentioned, like AI show notes, an AI transcript, clips of the most engaging parts of your interview, kind of already put in this reel format. You can add captions to it. You can change the layout to make it good for Instagram Reels or TikTok or something like that. And so that's really what we're focused on, is making high quality production more accessible to more people. So you don't need these intense editors or things like that that suddenly this becomes almost a blocker to you telling your story. Instead, we're just really focused on trying to create high quality that makes your life easier for creators.
Yeah, I think it's great. Sometimes the AI notes, like what you'll do is you'll say, "Hey, generate AI clips for social." Sometimes they're on point, sometimes they're not. Guys. So it's still like AI. It's still figuring it out. But what it's great is it at least shows you what it feels is a great soundbite. So coming to it from a journalist perspective, I always pick something different But someone else may be like, this is great. So it could be really a great resource to people who are looking for sound bites to put on social. And then there's all these captions that you can add onto your social interview clips, which is great. So there's just so many wonderful features, and AI has come so long, and I'm really glad that we could at least talk about that. Were there any points that we didn't get to discuss that you want to bring up before we wrap?
I think that we covered it, but yeah, I would just kind of to go off of the AI point that I think that even if you're able to, I found that from AI, of course, it's not always right, but in the way that I think that sometimes even if it just picks up one thing, you're like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, there's so much that we have to do as content creators that
Correct.
even sometimes having that one thing off of your plate, that you're like, great, I'll get a clip out there today, then that, yeah, it's been helpful for that way. But I even think I would encourage people, if you're already using Riverside, that as you were saying, there are other really great use cases for it to just make your life easier in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I record all of my meetings in Riverside. And then at the end of it, if somebody missed the meeting, I just take the AI show notes and I just like
Mm-hmm.
copy and paste it. Here's a summary of our meeting. There you go. I'm able to like have a transcript of that in case I kind of want to go back with a user call or something like that. So incorporating it to make other aspects of your content creation that aren't exactly the interview that you're recording easier. It's a helpful way to make the entire process just more seamless for you.
Yeah, I agree. I love that there's a transcript and you can even edit by the transcript, which is something that other AI editing platforms offer, but now it's all here inclusive at Riverside. So I just think it's a wonderful platform. I rave about it. If you go down into the description, you'll have a link to Riverside if you want to sign up and get your podcast going. I also offer tips on how to transform your podcast idea into a show. So if you're looking to develop a show, reach out to me. Having a background in television really does help you skip a lot of steps and get through the process really quickly. I have a roadmap to help you. So reach out. And, before we go, there's just one point that I really would love to get your thoughts on. So
Hmm.
many experts do want to create content to put themselves out there. What are your thoughts on podcasting as a way to try to help them lean into the news and attract the media?
I think that it's a really smart way to do that. And I think that as somebody, again, that's worked in news, that we're looking for people, like if there is something going on in your industry, sometimes
Mhm.
even something that's not going on in your industry, if you're able to connect it with yours, to be able to have a soundbite out there that has you commenting on it, it's great for discovery. So let's
Mhm.
say that there's some news story and then you have that you're able to kind of comment on. If you're able to get that out and put some hashtags on it, or if you have a podcast and it's that keyword is in your description, you're able to pick up people that are searching for that topic, maybe not for your content, but because they're searching for that topic, they come across your content. So I actually think to be able to have some news pivots in there in your podcast, in any of your content, is smart because those are the trending topics, beyond kind of what's trending on TikTok. If you're able to have some kind of news plug in there, I would definitely recommend doing that because that's just it's adding another way to get discovered, and that's
Mhm.
not that's not going to hurt you.
And that's really great to hear from you, especially since, I'm out there regularly telling people like you just need to be discoverable. Like you need to be putting yourself out there and showing the value that you can offer so that a news agency wants to pick you up. If you're pitching and you have nothing online, they're going to be like, can this person even like be on TV? Like, are they going to can they handle the lights? Can they handle the on-camera conversation? So putting yourself out there, in my opinion, helps. I mean, do you have any
Yeah.
other thoughts on this
I
before
was just
we?
gonna, yeah, I was just gonna say
Yeah.
that like no press release that you send or no
Mhm.
like email that you send, I would love to be on your show, is gonna be more powerful than actually having a video of you discussing it and doing it in a dynamic way that is fun and interesting to watch. So like save the time writing the long release, because you and I both know that we're like in news, you're getting a million of those. But if there's a video that pops out to somebody, that stands out to somebody, that is super powerful for getting your voice out there. And then I also just wanted to kind of plug, because I had forgotten to, that as I had said before, lead a community of podcasters. And I know that this can kind of feel like a lonely path sometimes, because a lot of people are recording remotely, you're doing this on your own, or you might not have other people in your life that's doing this. So there are communities out there. Riverside's is Conversation Creators by Riverside on Facebook. And it's just, there are thousands of creators. And something that I love that's different than journalism is that in the creating space, everyone is so willing to share what they're doing, how they're doing it, which platforms they're using. Like, enlist those communities to really help build you up, because they want to, and they're actually very good at it.
Yeah. And make sure you follow Riverside on Instagram. You can also follow Kendall on LinkedIn or Riverside on LinkedIn. There's great resources out there, guys. And on Facebook, as she said, to join that group. And guys, if you're out there, look for me, because I'm also active in those groups under Jamie_the producer, or my new handle On Cam Ready, which matches this podcast. And remember to go down to the description for links to learn more about Kendall, Riverside, and what we have to offer here at On Cam Ready. Thank you so much for being with us, and I'll see you online.